We're going to move now to our next speaker. Mardi Steere is a PEM physician, retrievalist, and health leader who is passionate about strategic development of universal health coverage, particularly for the underserved. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys so much for having me, and my goodness, that's a tough act to follow, especially when you've got a title like Patient-Centered System Design, which I'm really glad this wasn't a breakout session because I'm pretty sure you wouldn't have shown up, I wouldn't have shown up. So without your permission, I've changed the title to Systems, Silos, and Kids at the Centre. And just to build on what Vicky, you just ended up with, we can't keep doing what we're doing. We have to change. I wanted to talk today, and I was asked to talk on just what I'm passionate about and what makes me tick, and how we make a difference when systems are broken and we're in a broken world and we're just one very small drop in a bucket. So I actually wanted to talk to you guys today not about how you can create a system of something amazing, or how you can dismantle a system that you are completely frustrated with because it's broken, but how you are the system, and how every little thing that you do is the only thing that makes a system change. My goal today is to encourage you that after COVID, after burnout, after looking at the world around us and sometimes being overwhelmed, and that being brought into stark relief in the last couple of years, that change is possible and dreaming is really important. And without you, I can promise you, change won't happen. So, there are 4 kind of principles that I just wanted to talk about today and help, I hope, encourage you guys about what your next steps might be, where you're working and in what you're doing in your role today. So where do we start? The first thing I want to say today is dream a dream. Most of us here are involved in paediatric care in some way, and I wanted to ask you guys, when and where did this start for you? For some of you, it was taking care of a little brother and putting the Band-Aid on a scraped knee. For some of you who are of my generation, maybe it was reading the Babysitter's Club novels. For me, my dream came slowly. I didn't like kids, never wanted kids. I never babysat, and my poor younger brothers were subjected to me playing teacher with them in the cubby house where I would write on the chalkboard. So being a paediatrician was never a dream for me, and it was never a natural next fit. I went into medicine because that's what the smart kids did. I cut up cadavers dutifully. I coloured in my anatomy drawings. I just kept going for the straight A's because that's what the smart kids do. I was never going to be a paediatrician because women do that. I was going to be a craniofacial surgeon because you find the hardest thing that you can do and then you push through the glass ceiling and then you're at the top of things. But I was also an introvert with a decent amount of social anxiety. I will never forget my first clinical placement where I was standing trembling outside of a patient's room about to take my very first history, feeling nauseated at the thought of asking a complete stranger some really personal and intimate questions. And medicine, the clinical side, took me a really long time to feel comfortable with. It was when I got to paediatric emergency medicine that I found my tribe. I found a place which was a wonderful mix of adrenaline and nursery rhymes, and of cutting and casting and crying and cuddling. It was the place that I wanted to be, and I have had no regrets about being there ever since. When I finished my paediatric emergency training, I actually foolishly fell in love with an American and got married to an American and ended up navigating the American training system, and I did my residency and fellowship over there in peds emergency medicine and was working 80 to 100 hours a week. Fortunately, I had a really supportive husband who was in the US military on ballistic missile submarines and was underwater for 6 months at a time. And so after 6 years of marriage, we hardly knew each other. We both finished our ridiculous commitments because thank you US Navy for paying for my husband's college, or we'd still be paying it off right now. But after 6 years, we decided to take a break and travel. And what that did for us is it created space for us as individuals and a couple to say, who are we? What do we want? Who am I outside of this hamster wheel that we've been running on for the last 6 years? As we had that space and that time to ponder, we had space to dream again. And my heart and soul felt really deeply my incredible privilege. Where I was born, the family that I had, and the education that I'd received. And so as we took time to explore, my husband and I felt a real passion stirring in our guts and a fire to care for people who were subjected to poverty, loss, and injustice. The articulation of that dream led to me and my husband and our kids aged 2 and 4 to moving to Kenya in 2011 on initially a 2-year commitment, where we ended up living in rural Kenya for the next 8 years as humanitarian workers. And that same passion is what led to me when we moved back to Australia in 2019, finding my Australian dream job, working for the Royal Flying Doctor Service in a leadership role, investing in rural and remote people. I truly believe that changing healthcare equity starts in some small way with me, and it starts with you. That was my dream. So I wonder if you would humour me for 2 seconds and close your eyes. Would you remember, when you started your paediatric journey, did you have a dream of what that looked like? Is that dream something that you've given up on? Or is it a dream that you're really trying to pursue, but your career and your commitments have you sidetracked and maybe a little frustrated? For some of you, and you can open your eyes if you did humour me and shut them, for some of you, you've been able to pursue your dreams wholeheartedly, and I just love listening to so many of the speakers this week whose dreams have really resulted in some tangible results and are quite frankly intimidating. For some of you, your dreams have been lost or squashed, or they've changed, but maybe somewhere inside of you, that dream is still dormant. Maybe in the last couple of years, you've actually suffered moral injury. Maybe you're burned out. As Shahina was saying yesterday in the wellness breakout, if that's the case, that's not your fault. And can I encourage you first, before you dream, please take the time to heal. You matter, and what you've been through really matters. But if you haven't been burned out and you haven't suffered that injury, or you have come through the other side, take the time to give yourself permission to dream again. As you're dreaming, that dream can be really fluffy and a feel-good, this is who I want to be. But it can also be something really concrete. And I want you to turn your dream into a big, hairy, audacious goal. A BHAG opens up possibilities for the system that you have never considered. It is so clear that you can see that news headline on Twitter. Is it on Twitter? You're on Twitter. It propels you from thinking small and not settling for less than the best. And it's got the power to inspire everyone around you. Merck's, the pharmaceutical company's BHAG in 1930 was to transform itself from a chemical industrial manufacturer into a pharmaceutical company. And look what they did. Microsoft had a ridiculous BHAG, a personal computer in every home. Now they're in our pockets. Google's BHAG, and this is, subtle, organise the world's information. As I work for RFDS and I think about my dream, I actually have a secret BHAG that I have not told my boss about, so do not tell him. My BHAG, no Australian more than 1 hour from critical care. That's it. No Australian more than 1 hour from critical care. It's ridiculous. It's a stupid BHAG. But it is my guiding star that gets me out of bed in the morning and propels me into the next part of my day. Will analysing this clinical KPI report get me one step closer to my BHAG? It actually will, because I'm measuring how far are my patients from critical care now. When I go to the Drugs and Therapeutics Committee and I have to endorse one more guideline, will that help me get to my BHAG? Yes, it will, because that adrenaline infusion through a peripheral line guideline that I've just endorsed is what my remote area nurse is going to use when we identify over telemed the next septic kid and we can start their sepsis bundle immediately. Will the paper that I'm working on about different and new models of critical care in regional Australia solve the problem? Heck no, it won't. But what if it starts a conversation and someone else starts talking about that too? So I want to ask you, when you get up in the morning, what is your big, hairy, audacious goal? What are you working towards? What would things look like if today your dream for the kids that you care for came true? Create a ludicrous BHAG and dream a big fat dream. All right, well that all sounds nice and pie in the sky. What do we do next? The next principle for changing a system is to stretch your bubble. I'd like you to take a moment with me and reflect on a literary masterpiece that has impacted really many of our lives. It's an incredible series of books, and it took the world by storm, with each newly released book anticipated with great excitement. And then it was exquisitely brought to life on the big screen in a series of movies that none of us will soon forget. You, of course, know what I'm talking about. Twilight. For those of you that have not experienced the wonderful world of Twilight, our protagonist, Bella Swan, is a young woman who falls in love with a vampire, and then she voluntarily gets herself envenomated so that she too can be a vampire and live with him forever. As you know from the Maya cinematic universe, every vampire has their very own unique superpower. Our hero Bella's superpower is that she's got a mental protective bubble that shields her from all vampire attacks and mind tricks. Over time, Bella realises that this shield doesn't just protect herself, but that she can actually learn to stretch and grow her mental protective shield, and she can protect those around her. Spoiler alert, I'm going to use this as a metaphor. Each of us has a bubble. We've got this environment that we've taken time to cultivate and to belong to, and we've got agency within that bubble. We have a tribe. We're able to share our own ideas with confidence, and we're also able to even, maybe, experiment with something new a little bit. Some of us have taken a long time to find our bubble, and we're very comfortable there. Some of us are in a shrinking bubble. It's a bubble that's sucking the life out of us, that makes us not want to get up in the morning. Some of us are amazing in our bubbles. Some of us can't see outside our bubbles. Some of us have a really comfortable bubble, and we're investing in the next little bubbles around us. Some of us are just waiting, though. Is it time for my bubble to stretch? The problem with even the best bubbles is that there's just not enough of them in Australia, and there's certainly not enough of them in the world. And our bubbles are just too far apart from each other sometimes to make an impact everywhere that we want to impact. And this is where I found myself when we moved to Kajabi. I was working in a regional tertiary hospital with about 360 beds, and we had an 80-bed peds ward with one nurse for every 20 patients, and vital signs were done 3 times a day. So when I arrived in Kenya and started working as a paediatrician, every night on call, I had a baby resus and die, every night. And I saw more death in my first 3 months in Kenya than I had seen in my previous 10 years throughout paediatric emergency training. But I had a bubble. My bubble were my 2 Kenyan paediatric colleagues, as well as a team of nurses who were dedicated and passionate, but there'd not been a lot of paediatric nursing investment in our hospital. And so we started small with targeting nursing education about how to not just suction a baby when they stopped breathing, but how to give oxygen, to ventilate, to use a bag valve mask. We also realised that some of these babies were at higher risk of deterioration and just needed closer monitoring than 3 times a day. And so we pushed our way into the 5-bed, what used to be an adult and is now a mixed bed ICU. After a year of doing this and taking care of kids in our ICU, we had a visit from a visiting team of paediatricians from Seattle who had been invited by the University of Nairobi to consider whether they might start paediatric ICU training. The University of Nairobi had a national referral hospital in Nairobi, and it had just opened the country's first PEDS ICU, 6 ICU beds for 55 million people. So this team said, you're doing ICU, they're doing ICU. Any chance you guys would want to work together on a paediatric ICU training program? Me and my friend Ariana said, that sounds great, but we're not PEDS ICU physicians. Why don't we make it a paediatric emergency and critical care training program? Because let's face it, we're not going to be doing post-surgical PEDS ICU care. This is about early recognition, resuscitation, and the first 48 hours of ICU care. So that's how our 2 little bubbles in Kajabi became a slightly bigger bubble and started to grow. After 6 years of curriculum development, of working with the Kenya Medical Association, the Kenya Medical Practitioners Board, the Kenya Paediatric Association and the University Senate, we gradually, through stakeholder engagement and approval after approval, were able to launch East Africa's first fellowship training program for paediatricians in paediatric emergency and critical care in 2018. We reached out around the world to find additional faculty to help us because there weren't many of us. And I will always be grateful to the Don't Forget the Bubbles crew, who I cold called out of nowhere and said, hey, I'm a person, will you come and help us? They met together as a leadership team, and then they came over to Kenya for one of our intensives and have been coming over every couple of years since. They're coming over in February next year, but they don't know it yet. So as a result, we now have 5 paediatric emergency and critical care graduates running 5 paediatric ICUs in East Africa. 2 of them are now starting their own training programs in Rwanda and Tanzania, and there are 5 more fellows in the pipeline with more to come. Our program joins the only other 2 PEDS ICU training programs in the country in Egypt and in South Africa. 3 programs caring for 1.2 billion people across the continent of Africa. Our little bubble has now become PEC Africa, which is starting to bring together clinicians who are providing PEDS ICU. There's just not a training program, but there are mixed ICUs and EDs all across the continent, just with no formal training. And now we've formed PEC Africa, which is around 2,000 clinicians who are all at least networking over social media and learning from and with each other. Enough about me though, let's get back to you. Think of your dream, think of your BHAG, and think of your bubble. Who else is someone outside of your bubble that maybe has your same dream? Maybe it's someone in the same location, but just in a different discipline. Maybe it's someone with the same role as you, but they're just in a slightly different location. Maybe there are other bubbles of people like you that you haven't even thought of yet. Maybe it's school nurses and counsellors who are really passionate about adolescent mental health, but maybe don't have the connection to the medical community that they would like to be equipped in that area. Maybe there's a group of remote area nurses who have the same dream as you, but there's not paediatric investment into the annual Krana Plus learning program. Maybe there's rural generalists who provide amazing care for children, but they'd really like some complex paediatric telemedicine regular reviews on some of their patients that they see in community rather than having to send them into the city. Maybe there's regional volunteer paramedics who are really passionate about the concept of community paramedicine, but you don't know what that is. But maybe you've got the same dream. Maybe it's even a surgeon. I'm fascinated actually by the theme of tribe and community that's really woven through the last couple of days here already. And I think that there's a reason for that theme that is just well done or serendipity. But today I want to ask you, can we stretch our bubbles to grow our tribe? Maybe our bubbles are a lot stretchier and a lot closer than we think. I'm coming in for landing, but I am going to go a couple minutes over. I'm really sorry. Third principle is let go of the lolly. When you see this, does this make sense to you? That kid who puts their hand in the lolly jar and then holds onto it so tightly that they are never going to get the hand out of that jar without breaking the jar. I think sometimes there's a tendency for those of us who dream to dream in a straight line, to hold so firmly to our dream that it really cannot be pried out of our cold, dead hands or shaped or changed or moulded in any way. Sometimes in our passion and our dream, as good emergency physicians and clinicians, we jump to a conclusion about what that solution looks like. We step from our known and we try to put our known into the system that's broken, but it might not be the right fit. We see the need and we take a needs-based approach to what should come next. We identify a gap and we plug them with what we see. But instead of a needs-based approach, as you look at a system, I'd like you to take a different approach. In every system where there's a need, there is probably something that's already there. Someone, some asset in place that wants to build on that dream that you have already in their own way. When I think of regional and remote Australia, it's really easy for me, from my Adelaide City perspective, to look into the country and say, what's missing? There's not enough GPs in small communities. There's not enough regional ICUs. There's no regional ICUs in South Australia. There's no neonatologist when Sesign doesn't have an obstetrician. Someone gives birth and a prem baby is born. But what if I turn the telescope around and look through it the other way and say, what's already there in those places? I know this is an emergency conference, but this is not airway, breathing, circulation and disability. The approach of looking at what's already there and how can we build on it is known as asset-based community development. And that's a phrase that I think is what Josh referred to yesterday when he was talking about what do people have, what do they need, what are they asking for, and what can we have? How can we be a part of identifying what assets are already in place? Maybe it's regional communities who've got some passionate and highly intelligent school kids that you can tap into to be a part of the solution. Maybe it's culturally embedded and respected community elders who have trust, who have influence, and have ideas about what their people need. Maybe it's incredible volunteer MFS workers and there's no community paramedics, but your first responders are there all the time, ready to go and just need some help. Maybe it's highly skilled RANs that provide all of the care for the kids in the community, and they're there and they're waiting to grow their own bubble themselves. For those people, rather than trying to push them into my lolly jar to fit my solution, maybe we take an assets-based approach and we do the following. We ask questions. What do you already have? What do you think you need? And how do you see me contributing to your idea of what the next steps are? Be curious. Don't latch on to your model of care. What if there's a new model of care? What if a paediatric emergency physician doesn't work in a paediatric emergency department? Maybe instead of being specialists and we forget the general, maybe we're generalists plus and we go and work as a general paediatrician in a regional site. Or maybe I'm a paediatric geneticist who can't find a job and has to move to Sydney. But what if I was a paediatrician in a regional community who also had extraordinary genetic skill mix? How much would that expertise spread throughout our country if we took the generalist plus approach rather than the specialist minus? Co-create. Start something small together with people in need and develop it together, and then define with them what success looks like and give it a red hot go. And then depend on them to tell you if it's working or not, and maybe the next steps that we take from there. And finally, my very last point is remember who you are. It can be really tempting to dream a dream and have a goal, and then before you know it, it collects a head of steam and it runs away from you. Or things go nowhere and it shuts down and you're crushed. Or maybe your ideas take off and become a runaway freight train, and you either come to a standstill or you become so consumed in your dream that you're at risk of derailing because of your overcommitment to the chaos. I have to confess that I'm a person that struggles with this. I'm sure you can tell that from how fast I talk. I get really excited about things. When things run away from us or when they fail, remember who you are. Have you guys heard of the hedgehog concept? Hedgehogs are simple creatures that understand what they do best and they just focus on doing that for their whole life. And they remain hedgehogs for their whole life. As you dream your dream and you stretch your bubble, remember this. There is only so much of you to go around. Every so often, when I get tied up in work, I have to take a step back and ask myself, aside from what I'm doing, who am I being? And is that consistent with the me that I am and the me that I want to be? The months I took off when I was 28 and we were travelling, and I really developed with my husband this passion for serving those who were recipients of injustice and not receiving equity of health care. Was time that I actually took to define my hedgehog. And this is exactly what Una was talking about yesterday in the session. For me, my hedgehog is 3 core values that I've had for 18 years and I've never wavered. And it's what I prioritise when I'm thinking about what do I do next. It must align with my 3 core values. My 3 core values have and will continue to be love, serve, and mentor. Today, will my priorities help me love my family, my friends, and my community? The decisions I make today, will they align with the fact that I want to serve? I want to serve the people around me, those who are disadvantaged, and it aligns with my faith and what propels me every day. And will today's priorities help me mentor? Because I am here for the blink of an eye and anything could happen tomorrow, and my BHAG is bigger than me. If something happens and I'm gone tomorrow, who else is a part of bringing a solution to broken things around us? Love, serve, and mentor. That's me. Who are you? At your core. Because this is the foundation of the legacy and the systems that you leave behind you. The only way that a system changes is with the germination of a dream and someone taking the next step towards it. Please dream a dream. Our kids need it. Then be brave and stretch your bubble. Don't be afraid to let go of that lolly. And always, always remember who you are. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mardi. Ari's got one question for us.
So this is from Twitter, and I would first like to say that BHAG is trending. Congratulations. This is 60 seconds for our two other speakers. Mardi has shared her BHAG. We'd love to hear your BHAG. This is your elevator pitch, 60 seconds, and we will get you the people to expand your bubbles and make them real.
What is it? Big hairy goal. What is your one sentence of what you want to see come true in the future?
Very interesting, actually. I have lots, by the way. I'm what they call a squiggle. I have no boundaries and I have no ceiling. So everything we do, if I talk about the institute and the values we have and the organisation we I suppose organise for our clients and do, is for that to go to basically nationally and to really support a lot of the other archos that are really struggling in some of the areas. The concepts that we have, we do go out a fair bit, but to support and for systems and governances to actually support what it is we do and what can actually help with everywhere else. So in terms of that, in terms of workforce, that would be my biggest BHAG. In my life, I'd love, what would I love? A nice big house in the bush with a big pool and a swimming pool and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, that would be my and a couple of hectares for my kids to just go silly. So yeah.
So what? Geez, I'm lost for words for the first time in my life. What I would like is to everybody to join the quest to eliminate rheumatic heart disease. So everyone here can do something. Don't think that it's out of your control. So everyone join together and let all your little bubbles join in to be one big bubble in eliminating rheumatic heart disease. Yeah, that's it. I'm brain dead.
So thank you so much for all our speakers this afternoon. It was incredibly inspiring and I really appreciate your time. I think certainly for myself, I took away that we need to know who we are, know our history, listen to our community, and have a dream. So thank you so much for today, and I'll ask our audience to join us in thanking all our speakers as we close up.